After crossing, I picked up a man by the river. In order to treat his injuries, I went up the mountain to chop wood every day, and my palms were covered with blisters. He stared at my hand with guilt and said, "I will never let you down in the future." Later, he returned to the capital and became the crown prince again. He took me to his place as promised and made me his concubine. He doted on me very much. They all said that I, a peasant girl, was extremely vulgar and their words were very unpleasant. The palace maid asked me to tell the prince to punish them, but I just smiled and said nothing. Until one day, the prince touched my face and spoke in a low voice. He said, "Susu, I always feel that you didn't come to the capital for me." The smile on my face froze. Finished. Discovered.
1.
Saving Pei Min was indeed a gamble. After all, he was wearing rags at the time and had no valuables on him. His body is covered with wounds, and he might die at any time. I thought for a moment and decided to drag him back. If you are not a powerful person, just consider it as saving a life. If it was really like the fallen nobles in romance novels, then I would have made a fortune. Later he woke up, and his noble temperament slowly emerged, and I knew what was going on. She pretended to be in a difficult situation, carried a large pile of firewood back from the mountain, and said to him with an innocent smile, "If you sell this bunch of firewood, we'll have enough money to treat your injury." He lowered his eyes and stared at the blood bubble on the palm of my hand, his eyes full of complexity and guilt. He said, "I will never let you down." My smile froze for a moment, then recovered after a while, and muttered to myself, "Does this mean you want to pledge yourself to me?" But I clearly only wanted his money.
2.
The day Pei Min regained his status as crown prince and took me back, I was conflicted for a long time, but finally decided to go back with him. There is no other reason. After all, for a student studying social history, it is something to be grateful for to be able to witness a period of palace history with one's own eyes. I filled a sack with clothes and followed the guards into the capital. The actual palace walls are a bit broken, rotten, and small, and the decoration is mainly elegant, not as good as that of modern wealthy people with a little more money. I tried hard to overcome the psychological gap and comforted myself. It's okay. The sense of superiority is based on horizontal class comparison among peers. If we really compare this era, when people had to write poems to record eating lychees, with the modern era, when people can casually eat crayfish, life would be really unbearable. Pei Min treats me well, and there is no one else in the Eastern Palace except me. I felt bored, and sometimes I secretly asked him to marry a concubine to chat with me. Pei Min gave me a meaningful look. That day, he brought me into the palace and placed me with the queen for a morning meeting. Listening to the concubines speaking in a sarcastic manner, the art of speaking contained in their words is enough for a student in an ivory tower like me to learn for 8 lifetimes. Finally, the queen said calmly, "That's enough." The pressure was so overwhelming that I couldn't help but shiver.
3.
I am just a poor student with little knowledge. I lived in the countryside before entering the palace. After entering the palace, I was spoiled by Pei Min and never learned any rules. The palace maids gathered together secretly and laughed at me, saying that I was a savage and very vulgar. My subordinates told me to go to the prince to complain and punish them, but I shook my head and let it go. I am very self-aware. I'm just a wild man who comes here to eat and drink for free in this palace and gain some experience along the way. As for what they say about me, I won't lose much weight. We are all miserable people, so why should I make things difficult for them? Pei Min is not as kind as I am. The night he learned of the rumor, the lights in the East Palace were on, and dozens of palace maids and guards were forced to be fanned, with their teeth falling out all over the floor. He cast a light look at them and sneered. "How can I allow you to slander me, a lonely person?" I was so sleepy that I fell asleep that night and had no idea what happened. I had to rely on the palace maid Xiaoqing to recount what happened the next day. She fanned me, with envy on her face. "Your Highness truly loves the queen." As I listened, I felt a chill in my heart. I reminded myself once again, this is a feudal dynasty, there is no human rights. I cannot use modern thinking to measure their behavior. But when I think of those palace maids who had their teeth knocked out because of a single word and they were all in their prime, I still can't help but feel terrified. 4. Before the crown prince married the crown princess, the queen called me over and scolded me. The crown princess comes from a distinguished family, has a distinguished family background, and is well educated. She will not deliberately embarrass you. You and I have seen clearly that she is a simple-minded person, and she is the protection of the prince. As long as you behave yourself, your future will not be too bad. We talked for half an hour, and I knelt for half an hour, and my knees hurt a lot. He limped out and was bumped into by Pei Min. He panted slightly, his expression a little impatient. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming?" I glanced at the nanny standing beside me and didn't dare to say anything. Pei Min picked me up and carried me towards the sedan chair. I was thinking in a daze as he gently put me on the seat. They say I am lucky, and they are right.
5.
The day Pei Min married the crown princess, I first thought of leaving. I have been here for almost half a year, and I have visited the East Palace. It is just red bricks, green tiles, and some familiar green plants. The class oppression under the feudal system is particularly evident within the walls of this palace. There are thousands of people, big and small, in the square courtyard, but there are only a few masters who can decide their life and death with ease. The seemingly majestic and solemn palace walls have buried countless lives. After Pei Min married the crown princess, he would certainly not dote on me as much as before because he was concerned about her reputation. Will there come a day when I am forced to kneel on the ground, slapped in the face by a nanny, with my teeth falling out all over the floor? I couldn't help but feel scared. I want to leave.
6.
Pei Min will definitely not let me go now. It was when I really wanted to do something without telling him that I suddenly realized how powerless I was in this palace. I have no connections, no relationships, and no one who obeys me. Everyone around me comes from Pei Min. Everything I do and say is recorded and reported to him by someone. Just like the second day when I was feeling depressed, Pei Min came to see me and picked some lilies from the vase. I told the crown princess that you don't have to go to the ceremony. This is inappropriate. There's nothing inappropriate. He hugged me and kissed my forehead. Didn't you sleep well last night? Xiaoqing said you were in a bad mood. I'm thinking about something. I said honestly. I feel that I'm pretty useless. Pei Min smiled. You have me. If you want something done, just tell them and they will help you do it. I pursed my lips and stopped talking. Pei Min seemed to have noticed something, and the smile on his face turned a little colder. He reached out and twisted my chin. Something you don't want me to know? I was unhappy and didn't answer him. Pei Min's face turned completely cold. The palace maids around him all knelt down in fear. I belatedly realized what was happening as I looked at his gloomy and angry face. It was the first time I realized it so clearly. He is the crown prince, at the top of the feudal dynasty class pyramid. Without his favor, I would be nothing more than an ant trampled upon by others.
7.
Pei Min left angrily, scaring all the palace maids. And I went to meet the crown princess. She seemed very unhappy to see me. When I woke up from a nap, I saw her wearing a bright red dress, leaning on a soft couch, fanning herself with an embroidered round fan. He looked at me indifferently, as if he was looking at an insignificant object. When I was taking a history ethics class before, the teacher said that medical conditions in ancient times were poor, and giving birth was a life-threatening situation for women. The role of a concubine to the wife was like that of a modern surrogate mother. I pursed my lips. The crown princess gave me a very valuable gold hairpin in the shape of a crabapple tree and asked me to wear it to play with it. When the hairpin was returned, Xiaoqing took it away, saying that it was a gift from the crown princess and should be kept well. Pei Min happened to come over at this time, and when he heard her words, he sneered. Which of the things I have given you is not better than this hairpin? Xiaoqing knelt down in fear. I stood up and was about to bow, but he stopped me. When did you become so polite? Isn't your highness angry? She was so angry when she left. Today the entire East Palace is talking about me falling out of favor. I am quite angry. He leaned on the couch, playing with his round fan with a smile. "But if I don't come according to your personality, you won't look for me. So of course I have to come here by myself." "You didn't do anything wrong. I just overthink it." He picked me up and put me on his lap, pinching my earlobe with his fingertips. "Stop messing with me, okay?"
8.
His words were soft and there was no airs in his voice. He seemed to be showing weakness, but he would not allow me to refuse. Before I could say anything, he frowned and asked, "Didn't you say you don't have to go see the crown princess?" "This is against the rules." I pursed my lips. After all, the backyard is managed by the crown princess. Pei Hung was stunned for a moment, then seemed to understand something. He touched my head and sighed. "You don't have to worry about dirty tricks in the backyard. Everyone in your yard is mine. I have also assigned secret guards to your side. All necessary protection is available. Don't worry." He took off the hairpin on my head, and my hair fell down to his wrist. He told me very gently, "Susu, you don't have to worry about anything as long as I'm here. I will always protect you."
9.
On the night of the Mid-Autumn Festival, the Crown Prince and the Crown Princess went to the palace banquet. I was bored staying in the palace, so I took Xiaoqing to the backyard garden to admire the moon. The moon was very round and bright, with a soft glow, exactly the same as what we see today. I died in a car accident in modern times. I grew up in an orphanage and had nothing to worry about. Even now, when I look at the moon and recall the past, there is no one I can think of. I sat lazily in the garden for a while, and just as I was about to go back, I saw a moon-white robe in front of me. After a while, I recognized it as Pei Min, the king of Qin, the son of concubine Li and one of Pei Heng's strong contenders for the throne. I bowed to him and said, "Your Highness, Prince Qin." "No need to be so polite, sister-in-law," he said with a smile. "My brother and the crown princess have stopped at the palace and will not be back tonight. I came here to let you know so that you don't have to wait in vain." I thanked him and was about to leave when he stopped me again. He asked me, "My brother and the crown princess are in harmony. Are you really happy with that?" "Sister-in-law, have you really never thought about the position of the queen?"
10.
It was already a bit cold in August, and the autumn wind blew so bleakly that I couldn't help shivering. He looked at Pei Min in front of him. "Your Highness, Prince Qin, do I look like a fool?" He was stunned. How could it be? The throne is high up there. You and the crown prince are competing with each other, each relying on their own abilities. In the end, who will win will be the winner. I understand your desire. But don't try to use me. I looked at him quietly. Reaching out to the backyard and taking advantage of women is the most incompetent and shameful thing to do. The smile on his face faded slightly, and he closed the folding fan in his hand with an inexplicable expression. "Everyone says my sister-in-law is a peasant girl, but now she doesn't look like that." He sighed. "I really want to help you, sister-in-law. My mother also comes from a poor family. Even if it's for the honor of the poor family, I should help you get promoted." I couldn't help laughing out loud. "If you really care about the poor, you should open more schools to accept students from all over the world, and you should change the imperial court's 9-rank system of selecting officials based on nepotism, instead of lying here and persuading a woman to conspire with you." I really want to persuade him to check his brain. Running to someone else's house and persuading someone's concubine to be a traitor. Even palace fighting dramas don't film it this way. It's really stupid. Those who accomplish great things should not be fussy about small matters. Your Highness does not care about the floods in the south of the Yangtze River or the situation in the north of the Great Wall, but instead is obsessed with the status of the women in your brother's backyard. Such a mind is really despised. Without waiting for him to speak, I bowed and sent him off. "It's late at night. Your Highness, please go back." 11. When we returned to the palace, Xiaoqing asked me nervously, "Should I tell His Highness about this? Do you think he wouldn't know if I didn't tell him?" I comforted her. "It's okay. It's not a big deal." The little girl was still trembling with fear. When she was pouring tea, the scalding tea poured on her wrist, and she couldn't help but let out a hiss. "Go back and rest." I let her go to bed with a bit of amusement, and I took off the pearl hairpins in my hair, took a bath and changed into pajamas. When I was lying on the bed drowsy, I suddenly bumped into a slightly cool embrace. It was a little cold, with moisture from the night dew, and Pei Heng's cold voice. "The concubine is really brave, Your Highness." I responded, "Aren't you resting in the palace?" I asked confusedly, and subconsciously hugged his neck and rubbed it. When I opened my eyes and saw his frosty eyes, I was startled awake. He must have known that I had met the King of Chen, so he rushed back overnight. I took my hand back and said with a smile, "What did Your Highness say?" He didn't say anything, nor did he smile. He just looked at me quietly, which made me feel uneasy. My voice became smaller and smaller. I didn't mean to meet him. He just showed up out of nowhere and said a bunch of nonsense. "You can't be mad at me." I tugged at his shirt and gave him a flattering smile. Pei Heng scolded me with a stern face. "You knew he had a bad background, but you didn't ask him to get rid of him. Why did you say so much to him?" I also advised him that those who achieve great things do not care about trivial matters. "Do you want to be a female scholar? You didn't even use the people I sent to you, and you just treated them as decoration?" When the secret guards came to report, do you know how worried I was? I lowered my head and said, "I know I was wrong." "Why are you bowing your head? Are you not convinced?"
No.
I raised my head dejectedly. Pei Heng pinched my cheek, looked at my unhappy expression, coughed, and softened his tone. "It's not a big deal, just be careful next time. The King of Chen is in an awkward position and has ulterior motives. I'm afraid you'll be deceived by him." He took off his coat, lay down in bed, hugged me, and scratched my waist with his fingertips. The hot air from the mouth and nose hit my ears. "My words just now were a little harsh, Susu. Don't be mad at me. I was just too worried about you. You have no idea how scared I was when I heard the secret guard say that you and the King of Chen had been seeing each other for an incense stick of time."
12.
He spoke sincerely, so I smiled tactfully and stopped dwelling on it. There are so many secret guards around me. Xiaoqing has martial art skills, and we are in the East Palace, so nothing can happen to me. As for why Pei Heng was so angry, it was probably because he saw me talking to another man, and his possessiveness got the better of him. He has always been a very possessive person. Once in a mountain village, I just said a few words to a neighbor who came to help me, and he warned me with a dissatisfied look on his face. "Jiang Susu, if you want to go back to Beijing with me, you have to treat me wholeheartedly and not divide your attention with others. How about I just give it to someone else?" He looked serious. "I don't want a fickle woman, Jiang Susu. If you want to be with me, you have to like me. If you dare to lie to me, I will make you regret it." He is a prince with countless women around him, but he acts like an innocent boy. I was thinking with my mind empty, looking at Pei Heng's satisfied face in front of me, and suddenly asked, "Your Highness, did you abandon the crown princess and come back by yourself?"
13.
"Yeah." He obviously didn't take it to heart. "Don't worry about it. Isn't this too disrespectful to the crown princess?" I said hesitantly. "Isn't this a bad idea?" "It's okay." He put his arm around my waist and said nonchalantly, "She knows her limits." I don't know how to describe the feeling of hearing this, but it certainly wasn't the joy of being pampered. I just think that as a woman, the crown princess must be sad if her husband leaves her for a concubine. "Your Highness, this is not right." I told him seriously, "You should go and apologize to the crown princess tomorrow." "Why do you care about her?" Pei Heng lazily opened his eyes. Since she agreed to the marriage, she should have expected this day to come. She has the Ministry of Revenue behind her, and she is thinking about how to satisfy my wishes and maintain her position, not about love affairs. He patted my shoulder. "Go to sleep. Don't worry. She won't dare to embarrass you." I pursed my lips and wanted to say something, but then I felt that I shouldn't interfere. Fell asleep quietly and didn't think about it anymore.
14.
Pei Heng was wrong. No woman can tolerate her husband losing face for a concubine, let alone a princess of noble status. I was punished to kneel in the courtyard under the scorching sun. I was about to faint when I saw Pei Heng running towards me. He had a public quarrel with the crown princess because of me, and scolded her for being jealous, in front of everyone, which severely humiliated her. By then, I had already been carried away in a sedan chair, and all the stories came from Xiaoqing's retelling. I heard her say with envy, "Your Highness is sincere to the concubine, even worse than the crown princess." I was stunned. Strangely, I couldn't even force a smile. I have received a modern education, which believes that everyone is equal and men and women are independent. But now I am competing with other women for a man's heart. Even though I have told myself countless times that this is ancient times, I still feel uncomfortable. Pei Hun came over to me that night and said apologetically, "I won't do that again in the future. Believe me." I looked at his bony hands and slightly shifted my eyes. "Your Highness," I whispered, "or just let me go." Pei Heng's aura suddenly condensed, and the aura of a superior pressed down on me, making it difficult for me to breathe. He drank his tea slowly. "Why?" "I don't want to stay here anymore. If I stay any longer, there will be a rift between you and the crown princess." Susu. Pei Heng raised his head and stared into my eyes. "Do you know if the woman in the East Palace wants to leave? Is there any way?" My hands shook subconsciously. He was carried on a board and walked out of Chonglin Gate sideways. Pei Heng looked at me expressionlessly. After a while, he touched my head and said, "I know that your thinking is different from that of ordinary people. You always think of strange ways. But Susu, you are a lonely woman. From the day you agreed to enter the East Palace, you can only stay here for the rest of your life and can't go anywhere else." This was the first time he called himself Gu in front of me. He was really angry. I said softly, "Your Highness, just treat me as confused. You'd better be confused." His voice was still deep. "Susu, don't have any bad thoughts. The East Palace is my territory. You can't afford the consequences of running away. If you dare to run, I will make you live a life worse than death." 15. Pei Heng has said this, and I have nothing to say. I am a person who goes with the flow, and I don't want to change the status quo unless I have to. But even if I don't provoke others, there will always be someone who won't let me go. When I was forced by the nanny to kneel on the cold floor, above me were the stern-faced queen, the crown princess, and Pei Heng, who looked embarrassed. Next to me was the nanny of the crown princess, who complained tearfully that I had bribed the palace maids to add musk into the crown princess's daily necessities, causing her to become infertile, and that I deserved death. All the witnesses brought in spoke clearly and convincingly. When did I go to see her? When did I give her the medicine? What benefits did I promise her? I listened in a daze and couldn't help but doubt whether I really did these things. Finally, the queen turned her gaze to me and said, "Chen, do you plead guilty?" "I have never done it." I looked up and said, "I really don't know why this girl said that. Do you have any evidence of your innocence?" I lower my head. "No." The whole place was somewhat silent, leaving only the shallow breathing sounds of the three people above. Pei Hun excused me. "Susu has always been kind and would never do such a thing." "Mother, you..." "Shut up." The queen was furious. "It's your crown princess who is infertile. This is a matter concerning the country. Do you still dare to protect her?" The queen glanced over with a sharp gaze. Xiaoqing behind him suddenly jumped out. "It is because I feel sorry for my master and want her to give birth to a grandson first. It is my fault."
16.
After a period of chaos, Xiaoqing was dragged away and beaten to death on the spot. Pei Heng picked me up with my limp body, and we sat on the couch back to the East Palace. My head was still confused for a moment. Pulling Pei Heng's sleeve, I whispered softly, "Xiaoqing, forget about her, Susu." Pei Heng touched my head distressfully. "The crown princess was found to be infertile, and the queen mother was furious, and it affected you. She also knows that you are innocent by nature, but in public, she must find someone to take the blame. Xiaoqing is a loyal slave. I will reward her family. Don't even think about it." "Then why is the crown princess infertile?" I looked at her stubbornly. "If it's not me, then who else could it be? Why did you frame me? I'll find out everything." He touched the bloody marks on my wrist, blew on them with a look of heartache, and said softly, "Trust me, Susu. I will clear your name." Pei hung.
Um,
I looked into his eyes, but couldn't say anything. Finally, I lowered my head and said, "Nothing. Actually, I want to leave. Call me a coward or call me pretentious. I just don't want to stay here anymore." Growing up under the red flag, I studied humanities and history and understood science and ethics. The textbooks did not tell me about the sinister tricks, and I did not learn to guard against them. I don't fit in with this palace wall. I feel like a piece of trash. I can't protect myself here, and I'm causing the deaths of innocent people. I'm different from you. I don't know how to scheme or calculate. I can't even see the trap that others have dug, and I still jump in like a fool. Pei hung. I beg you, please let me go. I don't want to stay here anymore. He was originally coaxing me gently. When he heard that I was leaving, the smile on his face froze, and then dark clouds covered his face. "I know you're scared, Susu," he said, "but don't even think about leaving this. Since you have entered the Eastern Palace, you belong to me for life. Even after death, you must be buried in the Eastern Palace mausoleum, with my name engraved on the tombstone." He pinched my face and said, "What happened today will never happen again. Don't be afraid." 17. The crown princess is unable to bear children, the people in the Eastern Palace are in a panic, and the crown prince is also having trouble at court. I curled up in my own palace, staring blankly at the albizia trees outside the window. I didn't even dare to go out, for fear of being plotted against by others again. Pei Hung came in with a sullen face. I was half asleep and subconsciously reached out to hug him and put my arms around his shoulders. He forced a smile and said, "You live a quiet life." I rubbed my eyes and asked, "What difficulties have you encountered, Your Highness?" He stared at me for a long time and shook his head. "Nothing." He pinched my cheek and said, "Susu, don't worry, I will definitely protect you." Later I found out that the crown princess's family joined forces with the court officials who supported the crown prince to put pressure on him and force him to execute me to vent the crown princess's anger. Pei Hung was busy every day, but he was alienated from the court officials. With Pei Min chasing him relentlessly, his situation was extremely bad. This is what the queen told me. She also gave me a poison drink. I don't want the prince to be troubled every day, so I just become the villain. Chen, whether you are innocent or not, you are not as good as the prince's great cause. I looked at the nanny holding the poisoned wine, ready to go, and whispered, "Can I drink it myself?" The poison wine was light and tasteless, just spicy. I remembered the white wine my father asked me to taste at the college entrance examination banquet. Unfortunately, in this strange world, no one will ever touch my head and tell me, "Try it. If you can't drink it, don't try to be brave." The last second before death, I thought, I can see my parents. 18. I'm not dead. The first person I saw when I woke up was the crown princess. She sat on the couch, lowered her head, and stroked the tabby cat in her arms. She gave me a lot of silver notes and household registration passes. The Eastern Palace has already announced the death, and the crown prince doesn't know you are still alive. She said, "Let's go, and don't enter this imperial city again." Why did you save me? I know you are innocent and have a good nature. You shouldn't die in vain. She said calmly, "I don't want innocent people to die in this party struggle." I pursed my lips, knelt on the ground seriously, and kowtowed to her 3 times. "Thank you for saving my life." 19. I took the money and traveled far away from the capital to enjoy the mountains and rivers. I never want to get even one step closer to that majestic and solemn imperial city in my entire life. Time passed quickly. After 3 years, the prince ascended the throne, and the king of Qin was demoted to Chaozhou. After hearing the news, I stood on the land of Chaozhou, wondering whether I should leave immediately. That party dispute that cost me my life without me knowing anything about it left me with a deep psychological trauma. Even now, when I think of the taste of that glass of poison wine, I feel a little nauseous. I really don't want to see Pei Min. The day we set out to leave Chaozhou, I was drowsy sitting in the carriage. Next to him was the beggar I picked up on the roadside. He had changed into clean clothes and was also a young man with rosy lips and white teeth. I call him Chongsheng. On the way, he curiously opened the curtain and looked out, and suddenly exclaimed, "What a luxurious carriage." I opened my eyes and just in time saw the words King of Chen flash by. I lowered my head calmly and didn't respond. I was finally stopped at the border of Chaozhou. Pei Min's familiar folding fan was in front of me. I concealed my disgust and asked him, "Sir, what's the matter?" He sighed. "Sister-in-law, is it fun to pretend you don't know me? Since I came to stop you, I have already found out your whereabouts. Although you have changed your residence permit, you can't hide it from my secret guards." Chongqing stood by and timidly grabbed the hem of my clothes. Pei Min couldn't help laughing when he saw it. "My brother is in the capital city, heartbroken for my sister-in-law, but she has a gigolo and is traveling around the country with him. If my brother knew about this, wouldn't he be so angry that he would vomit blood?" I turned around and motioned for Chongqing to leave, then turned around and sat on the stool, trying to talk to him calmly. "You've been demoted to Chaozhou, Your Highness. Let's go our separate ways. Can't you just pretend you've never met me? What good will it do to betray me or use me as a weapon? The throne has been secured. Can you still rebel?" "There's no need to rebel." He smiled and said, "But seeing that my brother is so straightforward now, I'm really not happy about it. I have to make trouble for him. Oh, I forgot to tell you, sister-in-law, the secret guards around me are all my brother's men. They send letters to the capital every day. Calculating the time, today's letter should be delivered to the Yangju Palace."
20.
I poured a cup of hot tea on his face and cursed him with gnashed teeth. "Are you sick?" He wiped off the tea in a panic, but his smile remained unchanged. "It's useless for sister-in-law to be angry with me. There are secret guards all around this carriage now. They won't listen to me. Even if I ask sister-in-law to leave, they won't allow it. This land belongs to the king, sister-in-law. You can't escape." He is right. It's okay that Pei Heng doesn't know that I'm alive. Once he knows, with his possessiveness, he will definitely not let me leave. All under heaven belongs to the king. If he insists on looking for me, where can I run to? 21. I was under the watch of the secret guards and saw Pei Heng on the third night. He was wearing a black suit embroidered with golden dragons. His dark aura weighed down on me, and I couldn't help but clutch the hem of his clothes. I saluted him. He didn't help me up, nor did he say anything. He just kept me in a half-squatting position until my legs started to tremble. Then he slowly said, "No need to be polite." I straightened up in embarrassment, with my hands hanging down, not daring to look at him. He asked in a deep voice, "Why don't you dare look at me?" I was at a loss as to how to respond, so Pei Heng just stood up and twisted my chin to force me to look at his face. He had lost weight, and after many days of traveling, there was a dense stubble on his chin. His eyes were dark and his expression could not be seen clearly. All that could be seen was the anger surging on his face. "Chin Susu, it's been 3 years. Do you think I'm easy to fool?" I was pinched so hard that tears came to my eyes, but I didn't dare to say anything. I could only stare at him with tears in my eyes and shake my head with difficulty. "Why are you crying? Do you think I will still feel sorry for you? I'm telling you, don't even think about it, a heartless woman like you." He let go of my hand and paced around the room anxiously. After a while, he slammed the door and left without even glancing at me. Soon a eunuch came to help me pack my things. I was half forced and half invited to get on the carriage back to Beijing. 22. Pei Heng asked me to be a palace maid, helping him get dressed in the morning every day. As he said this, he sat on the dragon bed with his legs wide open, looking down at me, who was kneeling on the ground. He sneered, "Why? Do you feel wronged?" I pursed my lips. "No. I just felt like I might not be able to get up. If the emperor was a little diligent, he would get up at 4 in the morning. I never got up that early in high school." The chief eunuch beside Pei Heng was named Fu Rui. He was very polite to me and let me sleep in Pei Heng's outer room at night to keep watch. Through a folding screen, I saw the bulging figure on the dragon bed and heard his gentle breathing. In a trance, I seemed to be back in that mountain village. He was lying in bed injured, and I was sleeping on the floor across a pile of firewood, chatting with him about astronomy and geography. the professional courses I had learned in college, and what the teachers had said. Finally, he whispered, "No one has ever told me this before. It's very interesting." "Of course," I said with a smile. "These are mine. I am the only one in the world who knows them." Pei Hung. I suddenly called him in a low voice. My eyes felt a little sore, and I opened my mouth to say something, but in the end I didn't say anything. I turned over and closed my eyes. Just as I was about to go to sleep, I felt a cool breeze in front of me. I opened my eyes and saw Pei Hung standing in front of me with disheveled hair. "Why are you calling me?" I pulled the quilt up, thinking of some things in the past. "Your Majesty, why don't you sleep so late?" He lowered his head and looked at me for a moment. Then he took me out of the quilt, threw me onto the dragon bed, and stuffed me roughly into the quilt. He also got in. I pulled at the quilt and called out weakly, "Your Majesty?" After you left, I thought about it for a long time, and the more I thought about it, the weirder it seemed to me. He said, "I always feel that you didn't come to Beijing because you liked me. I said a lot of sweet words to you, but you still pulled away without hesitation. You've been living a carefree life outside for the past 3 years, but have you ever thought about how it feels like to be alive in this palace?" There was a hint of coldness emanating from his body. I was silent for a moment, then poked his stiff muscles. "Your Majesty, neither of us will die if we leave the other. I am just a toy for you to entertain yourself. Your liking for me is no different from your liking for a talking bird or a new flower. You lost me, but you still had the crown princess, concubines, and even your biological parents. But during my time in the palace, I truly had nothing except you. Pei Hung, let's be fair. You hate me for not coming to find you when I was alive, but how can I find you? You hadn't ascended the throne yet, and there were so many factional struggles in the court. I couldn't win, and I didn't want to die again." He didn't say anything, but after a long time, he quietly took my hand under the quilt. He was lying flat on his back, not looking at me. His voice was calm, yet vaguely sad. "I don't treat you as a toy. I like you. I'm really angry. I'm angry that I couldn't protect you. I'm angry that I promised you, but didn't do it in the end. You don't know, when I learned that you were dead, I wanted to kill someone. I held your body and thought that as long as you could survive, it would not matter if I didn't become the crown prince. In the end, my mother slapped me awake. I have received more than 20 years of education. My father, the grand tutor, and even the emperor's policy have all told me that a king should not be emotional, but I have been emotionally moved by you. You've been gone for 3 years. I thought about you every day. I almost forgot about you until I found out you were still alive. I knew that if I didn't go looking for you, I would never have a weak spot, but I couldn't help it. I miss you so much, and I want to see you so much." Finally, he hugged me sideways, put his arm around my shoulders, and asked me softly, "Susu, do you want to be the queen?" 23. I shook my head frantically. "I don't want to, please don't be impulsive. I think it's fine now, or like before. The crown princess is a very good person, so don't make things difficult for her. She saved you, so I won't make things difficult for her." Pei Hung seemed reluctant to mention the crown princess. He leaned over and kissed my forehead. "Go to sleep. You won't have to get up to serve me tomorrow. Let the eunuch take you around the palace. Choose a palace you like, preferably one that's close to the Yangju Palace. Also, choose the title you like." I was stunned for a moment, then slowly replied, "Okay." After many twists and turns, I had no choice but to enter this imperial city. 24. It was probably 3 years since I left, but I had no resistance. I was taken by the eunuch to walk around the imperial garden, where I met the crown princess, who is now the empress. She stared at me for a long time and sighed. "You are back after all. It was my bad luck that I was discovered by His Majesty." I told the truth. "Empress, you are my lifesaver. I remember this favor clearly and will definitely repay you." She didn't answer, but glanced at my belly obscurely and said softly, "The best way to repay me is for you to get pregnant with a prince as soon as possible and continue His Majesty's bloodline." I subconsciously tightened my abdomen, touched my head, and looked embarrassed. "Wait a minute. In Yangju Palace, I sat on the couch in a daze. Pei Heng walked in and put his arm around my waist very naturally. "Did the queen talk to you about the child?" I nodded. "Don't worry about her. She can't have children. Her mother's family keeps urging her to do so. They even want to let her enter the palace as a concubine. Naturally, she is anxious." Pei Heng is not at all anxious about the fact that he still has no children. He pulled out a wooden hairpin with a peach blossom pattern from his bosom, waved it in front of me awkwardly, and put it on my head. Like a big boy giving something to his sweetheart for the first time, he smiled with the corners of his lips raised. "It looks good." I shook my head. "Your Majesty carved it yourself?"
Yeah.
He touched my ear, his expression unusually soft. "I want to give you a gift. I always feel that it is more meaningful if I make it myself." As he said this, the thin calluses on his fingertips fell on my earlobe, as if he wanted to drown me in a gentle sea. I whispered, "Your Highness is so kind to me. In this era, my life is probably valuable only because he likes me."
2.
Changshen was thrown into the academy by Pei Heng and studied with that group of old scholars. The eunuch brought him in to see me. As soon as he saw me, he grabbed my sleeve and sobbed. He always called me Ajay. Now that I haven't seen him for a few days, he was so anxious that he shed tears. A 15-year-old child is as anxious as a headless fly. I touched his head and said, "Changshen, you must study hard and learn from the master. Whether you become an official in the court or a compiler of historical materials in the future, you will need knowledge." He nodded with tears in his eyes. "Changshen knows." He asked me again, "Are you happy in the palace?" I was stunned for a moment, then speechless, and tapped his forehead with my fingertips. "Fool. This is the imperial palace, the richest place in the world. How can I be unhappy? But, all right." I was afraid that he would say something he shouldn't, so I interrupted him and asked the eunuch to send him out. When he was alone in the Yangju Palace, he looked at the crabapple flower pattern on the round fan and curled the corners of his lips slightly. Am I happy? Who cares? I just know the times. Pei Heng is my client. I will give him whatever he wants and what he wants from me. As long as everything goes smoothly, I will be satisfied. 26. On the day she discovered she was pregnant, Pei Heng rewarded the imperial physician handsomely. He hugged me excitedly and told me the child's name. When he is born, if he is a boy, he will be crowned the crown prince, and if he is a girl, she will be the most carefree princess. Few kisses fell on my cheeks, and his voice was full of excitement. "Susu, we are going to have a child that belongs to both of us." I smiled at him, but I felt a little uneasy in my heart. This uneasiness became a reality when the queen came to visit. She knelt down in front of me and begged me to adopt the child under her name. I pursed my lips and said, "We don't even know if it's the boy or girl yet. Why are you so anxious, madam?" "Both sexes are fine," she murmured. "As long as it's your child, His Majesty will treat it as a treasure. In his eyes, you are different from other women. I can't have children, I just want a child to live with me, just to repay me for saving you." I held my palace dress, knelt down face to face with her, reached out and held her hand, wanted to say something, but in the end, I kept silent. As soon as the queen left, the nanny beside the queen mother came over and gave me many instructions, telling me not to have any extra thoughts, to take good care of the baby, and that the prince was the most important thing now. The empress dowager, the concubine dowager, and even the royal family members whom I hadn't seen for many days, all sent me invitations to pay their respects to me. I wonder how many calculations are hidden in that thick pile of posts. I can't see through the metaphors between the lines. If no one teaches me, I can't understand them. This is Pei Heng's first child, but it was still a piece of meat in the stomach. In the court and the harem, countless eyes were staring at it, like a hungry wolf seeing fresh venison. Even though Pei Heng added a lot of people to my side, I still felt scared. 27. After 10 months of pregnancy, I couldn't hold on any longer in the 8th month, and my belly became as big as a ball. Even though the imperial physician said it was twins, I didn't feel happy at all. I just felt terrified. Sure enough, on the day of delivery, I was hysterical in the delivery room, and the imperial physician outside was asking them whether to save the eldest or the youngest. I don't know what they chose. I just heard blood gushing out, and the crying of the two children couldn't wake me up. In a daze, I thought that I wouldn't be so lucky this time. I was a junior student and came here because of a car accident. No one told me what to do or what to do. I could only follow my heart and rely on guessing. I haven't experienced much blood and gore, nor have I learned much conspiracy and calculation. I just feel a little regretful. If I could, I would still like to hug my own child. 28. When I heard Pei Heng's gentle voice in my ear, I realized that I was really lucky. I struggled to sit up, looked at the two wrinkled children wrapped in swaddling clothes, and pouted my lips, wanting to cry. So ugly. How could I give birth to two such ugly things? It will look good later. Pei Heng asked the wet nurse to take the child away, put his arm around my shoulders, and his eyes were shining. Susu, you gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. Well, I said sullenly, send them to the queen and let her raise them. Pei Heng was a little surprised. Why? Because I am not from this dynasty. Even if I try hard to fit in, I know I am just pretending. Every era has its own rules of survival. I cannot use my own values to educate my children because they need to survive here after all. The queen is a good person. She comes from a noble family, has a good background, is good at planning and calculating, and knows how to use people well. Only she can protect the two children and let them live well, instead of being like me, who knows nothing and can only rely on Pei Heng. When the queen came to pick up the child, she told me with a complicated look, "You will always be their biological mother." I shook my head. I don't care about that. It's okay for them to regard you as their mother. I don't like children. I've already suffered a lot to have them, and I don't want to spend the rest of my life with them. My queen, please treat them well. I will be grateful. 29. Soon it will be the 100-day party for both children. I didn't want to go, and the maid kept trying to persuade me. She kept nagging me for a long time, and I started to get impatient. I said I won't go, so I won't go. It's so annoying. As soon as these words were spoken, the palace maids and eunuchs all knelt on the ground. I was also stunned, and then I felt a chill in my heart. I looked down at the fan in my hand and said softly, "I'm sorry. My tone wasn't very good just now. All of you get out." I was clearly aware that I was being assimilated by this dynasty. When I first entered the palace, I couldn't stand the class differences among people, and I couldn't stand people being slaves, but I couldn't change it, so I could only try my best to treat people around me equally. But now, I have gradually accepted the fact that I am the master, and they are the slaves. The idea that all men are created equal gradually began to collapse, and I began to become exactly like the women of this dynasty. But once we become the same, will Pei Heng still like me? This is an irreversible dead end. 30. Pei Min came to the capital to celebrate the child's 100th day. He brought soil from Chaozhou, wrapped it in a thick package, and displayed it very carefully at the centenary banquet. The originally joyful banquet suddenly became silent, and all the civil and military officials felt that he was ungrateful. Pei Heng was not angry, but his expression was not very good. I really like this gift. After the banquet, I ran into him in the garden. Seeing that he looked much thinner, I was slightly startled. "Your Highness, are you not having a good time in Chaozhou?" He shook his head gently. "I don't have any happy or unhappy words. I just can't think straight." I wanted to give him some advice, but I felt that my theories were of no use to scholars like them who had been trained since childhood to maintain the stability of the country. Finally, I can only advise. No matter what, staying alive is the most important thing. His face was pale, and he smiled at me. Walking in the moonlight with his hands behind his back, he staggered a little, his back no longer straight, and he was slightly hunched. I had a vague feeling that his life was about to end. 31. Pei Min died in the winter when his child was 1 year old. The message was delivered by express horse. Pei Heng only glanced at it and threw it on the table. "It's New Year's Day, how unlucky." I silently picked up the letter sent by the secret guard, stroked the words sudden death, written in Chingsong ink, and whispered, "It's a human life after all." I put the letter back on the table and looked up at the falling snow in the sky. I remember many years ago, when I first entered the palace, I didn't know the rules and ran around everywhere, and eventually got lost. It was Pei Min who met me and took me out of that rockery. He also handed me a lotus cake wrapped in a handkerchief. "Don't run around anymore," he said. "You can't always run into me." Whether he was sincere or taking advantage of me, he did have a relationship with me. It's sad that someone you know died like this. 32. Years later, the queen fell seriously ill. I went to take care of her several times. When she was in good spirits, she held my hand and chatted with me. She said she liked to eat peach blossom cake, but the Empress Dowager did not like it. Since entering the palace, she had never seen this snack again. She said that she was infertile because the prince gave her a sterilizing drug, and she tried to put the blame on the king of Chen, but unexpectedly, it affected me. His Majesty has never regretted giving me the sterilizing drug, but he regrets not being able to protect you. Her weak voice was filled with envy. "Susu, you have his love, which is the best thing in the world." She asked me again, "Are the days outside the palace good?" I have never left the capital in my life. I hugged her arms and cried my heart out. "Don't be reborn here in your next life. Come to my home. There is no war, no imprisonment, no emperor or queen. You can do whatever you want. You can study, learn, work, go wherever you want. Sister, don't come to a place like this again in your next life." 33. The queen died in the early spring of that year. I sat on the couch and looked through the small clothes she had embroidered for the children. It's very delicate and cute, and you can tell at first glance that a lot of thought went into its design. The two children were taken away by the Empress Dowager to be raised, and the court seemed to be afraid that the children would have too much contact with me. In their eyes, I am a beauty who brings disaster to the country and will cause unrest in the harem and the government. So many speculations and calculations were put upon me, and I had no intention of arguing. All I know is that the people I knew at the beginning have gradually left. Chongqing entered the court as an official, and I hadn't seen him for a long time. The next news I received was that he had been killed by bandits. I wasn't too surprised. Chongqing is my relative by marriage and is too smart. The moment I realized that he had the talent to govern a country, I knew that those pedantic courtiers would not allow him to live. I couldn't persuade him, who was devoted to governing the country, to resign and return home. A few days after Chongqing's death, I always thought of those extremely bright eyes when I first saw him. Among the beggars, everyone else took the money and left, but he firmly pulled my sleeve and said, "Sister, please take me away. I can work and I eat little, so I won't be a burden to you." In the evening, when Pei Hung came over, I asked him, "Your Majesty, can you avenge Chongqing?" He touched my head and said, "Susu, life and death are caused by accidents. He's just a beggar. If you have nothing to do, just look after the child." I was silent for a long time before I said, softly. 34. My boredom with this dynasty has reached its peak. Maybe I'm too inflexible. Even though Pei Hung still dotes on me, I still feel sad. Everyone I knew is dead. Only Pei Hung is left. And he is the emperor. I know that if I accept my fate and throw away all the values that originally belonged to me, I can be a good supporter of my husband and children and live a good life in this palace for the rest of my life. But I don't want to. Those values that are incompatible with this dynasty are the only things that can remind me that I was once a student living in the 21st century, not a woman born and raised in ancient times. I am afraid that I will forget my origins, my story, who I am and where I come from, and become a simple Chen in the history books. Pei Hung did nothing wrong. On the contrary, he was very good to me. The harem was quiet and peaceful, and there hadn't been any new people in for a long time. He seems to want to be with me forever. But I know that even if he has learned the appearance of modern monogamy, in essence, he is still an emperor under the system of male superiority and female inferiority. My life, death, honor, and disgrace all depend on his thought. I have no human rights at all. 35. After some time, foreign invaders came, and the border was in chaos. Memorials were delivered to us by express horse every day. Seeing Pei Heng's anxious look, I couldn't help but get anxious too. I know what it costs to lose. They ceded territory and paid compensation, lost their rights and were humiliated, and the imperial court even had to send someone to marry their princess. Soon the war ended and I accompanied Pei Heng to the border. This place had just experienced a war, and the people were displaced. Before the relief food arrived, they could only survive by eating tree bark. Pei Heng stood on the city wall, looking at the charred wilderness in the distance with heavy heart. He asked me, "Su, am I not a good emperor to these people?" "Your Majesty, you have surpassed other emperors by thinking this way." I stood beside him with my sleeves gathered up and said softly, "Natural disasters and man-made disasters are not what your Majesty wants. You can't blame others for being born in this unstable world. As for the state of the world, who can we blame?" 36. When Pei Heng was about to set off back to Beijing, something went wrong. The foreign invaders were still determined to take us back. When they learned that the emperor and the crown prince's biological mother were at the border, they tried their best to capture us. Pei Heng was wounded by an arrow. At the critical moment, I asked the guards to take him away, and I drove the carriage to lead away the group of foreigners who were chasing us, until they reached the edge of the cliff. I looked at the huge crowd behind me and the bloody horses, laughed miserably, turned around and jumped into the bottomless cliff. 37. I had been prepared for death, but luckily I was lucky. When I woke up, I was rescued by a peasant woman. They asked me where my home was. I was silent for a moment and made up a background story. Pei Heng must be looking for me all over the world now. And since I survived a disaster, I really don't want to go back. The prince's biological mother, who died to save the emperor, is far more useful than a peasant girl of humble origins. In the past, when I was in this strange world, I always lived a day-to-day life, focusing on experience first and not taking things to heart at all. But now, as the friends I knew in the first half of my life passed away one after another, I suddenly realized it. In this era, life is life, and people only have a few short years to live. I can't afford to waste it any longer. I want to live a good life. 38. I settled down in the mountains and, as a peasant woman and daughter, learned how to farm and raise animals. Learning this stuff is boring but useful. The mountains are far away from the capital, the people are simple and honest, and they are far away from those annoying value systems. Overall, I like my peaceful life now. Occasionally, I went to town to sell herbs and heard news about the capital. The imperial concubine is missing, His Majesty is seriously ill, the crown prince is young, and the court is in chaos. When I heard this, I was eating a hu pancake with my head down and didn't say a word. Pei Heng will not allow the political situation to continue to fall into chaos. He is a natural emperor, and my liking for me cannot influence his decision. He will be well soon, I don't need to worry. Just like what I said the last time, I went back to the palace and lay side by side with him on the bed. "Your Majesty, no one will die without the other."
He did not refute it at that time.
39. Before I knew it, another 3 years had passed. I couldn't help but feel bored with the monotonous days, so I packed my bag and said goodbye to the peasant woman and her family. I can embroider, make clay figures, and pick herbs, so I will never starve no matter where I live. I want to see the mountains, rivers, and land of my motherland, and see the undeveloped primeval forests, so that my life will be worthwhile. Today's world is good, the court is harmonious, the border is stable, and the people live and work in peace and contentment. Pei Heng has become a wise ruler praised by everyone. I have nothing to worry about. I learned acupuncture in a small clinic. Gradually, I had several medical students under me and knew how to control people's hearts. I learned some skills of managing subordinates from reading the book, and I felt quite moved. If I continue to be protected under Pei Heng's wings, I will never make any progress. The conclusion is, there is no way out of being a canary. Only when people are independent can they truly achieve the growth they want. 40. The trouble started in the 4th year. A young man in bamboo green clothes came to the clinic. He looked at me for a few times before smiling and saying, "You are a beautiful girl, but you are really wronged in this clinic. Why don't you come to my clinic?" I smiled and said, "Since when has medical practice become about appearance? Are you really so shallow, young master?" He smiled awkwardly and didn't answer. I have seen many people coveting my beauty over the years, but I didn't take it to heart. I just counted the herbs and planned to buy some more at the market tomorrow. It was already 3 o'clock in the morning when I finished my work. I was walking on the road with a lantern in my hand when suddenly a black cloth was put over my head. I was knocked unconscious and taken away. 41. The young man lives in the capital. He had seen me before and recognized my face. He didn't think it was me, he just wanted to use my face and send me to the palace to make profits for his family. I was hastily dressed and pressed down on the couch by a strong nanny and put on a gauze dress. When the young man came to see me, I looked at the green fabric on my body and pressed my brows with a headache. "Sir, why do you want to go astray? What if I fail to please His Majesty? Wouldn't it be a waste of time? Even if I can get it, are you sure that I will work for your family?" He smiled slightly and said, "I just informed my father that you are my half-sister who is recuperating in Nanshan. The Queen Mother is my aunt. You will serve her in the palace. If you cannot please the Emperor, the palace is ruthless and you will die." I squeezed my wrists. Is he really not afraid of making me very angry and going straight up to assassinate Pei Hung and play a game of 9 Clans Candy Crush? Yes, the Queen Mother is still alive and can protect them. No wonder they act so recklessly. I bit my lip and tried desperately to think of a solution. I can't enter the palace. This time is different from the last time. If Pei Hung knew that I was not dead and didn't go looking for him, I dare not think about the consequences. At night, I rubbed the rope around my wrists and ran out in the dark. He gritted his teeth, climbed over the wall, limped towards the city gate, and finally saw the base of the city wall. I found a secluded corner and squatted there, quietly waiting for dawn to leave the city. 42. I thought I was lucky enough to escape from the capital. It wasn't until I mixed in the crowd that I saw Lin Sheng, the guard beside Pei Hung, patrolling the city gate. He has been with me for a long time and is very familiar with me. When he saw me, he couldn't hide the surprise in his eyes. My heart sank, and I almost ran away into the crowded alley. He reacted and immediately had someone catch me, shouting, "Don't hurt her, not even a hair." I tripped over the rope and was surrounded by countless guards. Lin Sheng came over with a complicated expression and bowed to me. "My lady, why are you doing this?" "I'm not your queen. She's dead, Lin Sheng. Everyone has accepted this fact. Why can't you just let me go?" "Your Majesty's condition is very bad. Madam, you have been too willful in the past 3 years." Lin Sheng did not answer my question directly, but just ordered the guards beside him to bring the sedan chair over. My hands couldn't help but tremble, and when I thought about what I would face next, I subconsciously wanted to escape. I slammed my head against the ground. Lin Sheng exclaimed, "Stop her. Quick, stop her." Swoosh. An arrow flew towards me and hit my right shoulder, causing my body to roll to the ground. The pain was so severe that tears were about to come out. Through tearful eyes, I saw Pei Hung riding on a horse with a stern face. He slowly put away his bow and smiled slightly. Since someone doesn't understand the rules, there's no need to persuade them. What's so hard about wanting to die? You have to experience a life worse than death first, don't you think, Susu? 43. In the cold winter, I was thrown into the laundry to do laundry. The wound on his shoulder was not bandaged, and it tore and bled with the slightest movement. My hands were soaked in ice water all day long and got frostbite. Pei Hung was determined to make me suffer. On the 3rd day after entering the laundry department, I developed a high fever. The nanny whipped my back hard, and the pain was so severe that I bit my teeth until my knuckles bled. A palace servant recognized me and mocked me in front of me. She still thinks she is the prince's biological mother. The prince is now being raised by a concubine due she is a lady from a noble family. How can you compare to her? I can't compete. I held the bucket weakly. Are you done talking? You can leave now. Why are you pretending to be noble, you bitch? They suddenly came up and tore my clothes like crazy. Do you think you have His Majesty to protect you? His Majesty has already despised you. You are a peasant girl. Your status is even lower than ours. Why do you deserve to be clothed in fine clothes and fed with delicious food, and be treated like an eyeball by His Majesty? You bitch. I was pushed to the ground. The high fever in my brain almost made me faint. Heat waves rose from my limbs, and my mind became more and more hazy. I vaguely felt someone picking me up and landing on the soft bed. I completely fainted. 44. Pei Hung didn't just watch me die. Sleeping on his dragon bed, when he opened his eyes, he saw yellow tassels shaped like a golden dragon, looking majestic and solemn. I drank a large bowl of bitter medicine. The more I drank, the more I wanted to die. My eyebrows and eyes drooped, and my fingertips kept circling on the new bowl of medicine. If you don't drink, do you want to burn yourself into a fool? Pei Heng's cold voice came in, and my eyes were instantly filled with tears, which fell into the medicine bowl. I raised my hand and drank the black medicine in one gulp. He parted the beaded curtain and walked in, his boots tapping on the ground, a gloomy aura emanating from his entire body. He glanced at the wound on my shoulder that had been healed and sneered. Have you had enough of playing outside? I lowered my head and wiped my tears. He was impatient. Speak.
No.
I looked up at him. If I hadn't been kidnapped to the capital, I would never have come back. Chen Susu. Pei Hung was so angry with me that he smashed the cups on the table and pointed at me and cursed. You, do you know who you are? I am just a peasant girl. Your Majesty can strangle me to death with just one finger. My eyes were filled with tears again. Kill me now. I don't want to go back to the laundry department.
Why don't you shoot more accurately with that bow?
Shoot it in the middle of the chest so I don't have to wash clothes in ice water. His expression froze, and he came over and grabbed my hand. Seeing the frostbite on it, he was silent for a moment, then sneered and shook his hand away. You asked for this. I didn't say anything, just wiped away my tears, and didn't even look at him. Stop crying. Chen Susu, I told you to stop crying. I order you to stop crying, do you hear me? Chen Susu. He finally started yelling at me so loudly that even the birds outside the window were scared. I suddenly burst into tears. Why are you being so mean to me? What gives you the right to be so mean to me? I jumped off the cliff to save you. I thought I was really going to die. I just didn't come back. Why did I come back? I died twice by your side, and both times I was lucky enough to survive. You still punished me to do laundry and shot me with arrows.
Why?
What did I do wrong? I cried my heart out.
Pei Hung didn't care what I said.
I just kept crying. Finally, I forced him to press my hands on the bed and stare into my tear-stained eyes. Do you think you did nothing wrong by not coming back? Are you really that wronged? I stared at him stubbornly, tears streaming down my face. Pei Hung completely gave up the idea of settling accounts with me. I called the palace maid in to help me wash and dress, and also asked someone to bring the prince and princess over. The two children, both over 6 years old, came over and saluted Pei Hung respectfully while wearing light purple palace costumes. He waved his hands with a headache. Go see your mother. I hurriedly lowered the curtain and dared not look at them. They kowtowed to me outside, their voices childish and a little curious. Mother, are you well now? Father said that you fell ill while trying to save him and have been recovering in San Temple. Are you tired today? Then you can take a rest first. My brother and I will come to pay our respects tomorrow. I leaned against the head of the bed in a daze.
45.
Pei Hung came in through the curtain, and I asked gloomily, why didn't you tell them I was dead? They were only 2 years old that year. Do you want to leave 2-year-old children without a mother? Pei Hung leaned over and touched my forehead, his tone still unfriendly. You have been out there for so long. Your health has deteriorated, and the fever hasn't subsided even after taking the medicine. I turned my head away unhappily and said nothing. Pei Hung was so angry with me that he had a headache. He sat on the bed in his pajamas, pressing his temples. I suddenly caught a glimpse of the white hair on his temples, was slightly startled and involuntarily reached out to touch it. Pei Hung glanced at me, but didn't stop me. Instead, he sneered. Why? You think I'm old and you want to laugh at me? No. How could this happen? He was only 27 years old, which was the best age for him. How could he? Chin Susu, I said you have no heart. He sat next to me and said in a light tone, You just left. Have you ever thought about how I will live in the palace with 2 children? Should I thank you for leaving me 2 children? Otherwise, when you jumped off the cliff, I would have followed you directly to the place where you jumped off the cliff. You. I couldn't believe it. How could you? Yeah. How is that possible? He glanced at me calmly. If the master knew that I wanted to commit suicide for a woman, he would probably be so angry that he would sit up from his coffin and scold me. Chin Susu, before you make a decision, can you please think about me? You don't want to come back. You said that neither of you can survive without the other. You never thought that I can't survive without you. In the past 4 years, I haven't had a good night's sleep. I can only sleep by putting my child next to me and imagining what you look like and our family of 4. Any noise in the middle of the night can wake me up. When the wind blows the curtains, I always wonder if you're back to see the kids. You haven't appeared in my dreams for so many years. I thought you hated me for not protecting you, but I never thought that it was you who didn't want to come back. Sorry. I didn't know what to say, so I could only lower my head and apologize quietly. Pei Hung glanced at me indifferently and said nothing. He was still angry. He threw the curtain, stood up and walked out, saying, Go to sleep. We'll deal with the rest tomorrow. 46. The next day, the children came over and I touched their temples with joy, my eyes a little sour. It's your mother who is sorry for you.
No.
The prince shook his head. Because it was our mother who gave birth to us. That's why our father was so kind to me and my sister. Father has told us many times that we are the sons of our mothers. It is because we are her children that we have everything we have today. I was stunned for a while, and then I said in a cryptic voice, Did your father really say that?
Yeah.
The girl added, Father also asked us to be filial to our mother. Mother is sick, and it's not her fault that she's not with us. I stroked their head slowly, feeling mixed emotions. Later, Pei Hung came over and I noticed the white hair on his temples again. I feel mixed emotions. To be honest, I have never taken Pei Hung's feelings for me seriously. To me, he is party A, the boss, and someone who needs to be coaxed and accompanied. But he was sincere to me. I am not a careless person. Each and every one of these actions touched me. Pei Hung came later and brought ointment for frostbite. While applying the cream on me, he laughed at himself. I originally wanted you to suffer a little more, but I didn't expect you to be so delicate and unable to bear even the slightest bit of suffering. I lowered my head and said nothing. He continued, Actually, when I received Lin Sheng's message, my first reaction was to be thankful that you were still alive. At first, I was a little angry. I was angry that you didn't come back. I was angry that you were having a good time out there, which made me worry and fear for so many years. But later I figured it out. It was my fault that I failed to protect you, which led to you facing life and death again. In the final analysis, it was still my fault. He leaned over and hugged me. His voice was very gentle and pleading. Susu, promise me that we will live a good life as a family from now on, okay? I leaned on his shoulder, suddenly remembered, and asked sullenly, What happened to Du Jowie? 47. Pei Hung seemed quite happy and pinched my nose. Are you jealous?
No.
I turned my head. The group of palace maids said that she was the one who raised the prince. I found it strange. Pei Hung was stunned for a moment, then laughed. It seems that caning is not enough. They should really sew their mouths shut. Du Jowie was sent here by the queen's family, under the pretext of looking after the child, but the child has always been with me, and she is not allowed to get close to him. I turned my head away, tears welling up in my eyes again. What's wrong again? My back hurts. I choked. The whip hurts so much. The medicine is bitter, so bitter that I can't drink it. My shoulders hurt too. Why am I so miserable? Pei Hung pursed his lips, looking a little embarrassed. He raised his hand and touched my ear. I didn't understand it at the beginning. Susu. He untied his belt, stuffed it into my hands, sat with his back to me, and said in a muffled voice, "Go ahead and hit me, as long as it helps me vent my anger." I looked at the jade leather belt in my hand, then at Pei Heng, and suddenly I didn't want to cry anymore. She sat up and hugged Pei Heng's waist, resting her head on his shoulder. "When we first met, you looked at me like an enemy and wanted to kill me. Why is it that you are so different now?" "I can't bear to do that," he said softly. "You suffer, but I am the one who suffers. Besides, you are lucky to have escaped death. Why should I compete with you?" "Pei Heng." I called out to him. He raised his hand and touched my head. "It's okay, silly. I will never be angry with you. My whole life has been devoted to you. Susu, can you please have some pity on me?" 48. An emperor begged me to pity him in a mournful tone. This feeling is really irritating. Pei Heng and I have been together for nearly 10 years, and our child is already 6 years old. To be frank, he was involved in my transformation from a young girl to a young woman. Even though I hate the values of this dynasty, I have to admit that Pei Heng has done the best he knows. What about me? How can I do this? For the first time, I felt confused. How strong an emotion would it take for me to give up my freedom, risk being assimilated and losing myself, and be trapped in this cage-like palace? I thought I would never have such strong emotions. On my birthday this year, Pei Heng released a sky full of calming lanterns for me. He held his daughter in his arms and watched her clapping her hands tenderly, her white hair at the temples casting after images in the orange-red light. The prince stood on the ground, tugged at my sleeve, and asked timidly, "Mother, can you hug me?" I held him in my arms and sat in the pavilion, looking up at the sky full of lights. Suddenly, I thought of the spring festival, when my parents held my hand and went out to watch the fireworks for ancestor worship in my hometown. I think people always have to give up something. I succumbed to the warmth of reality. 49. In his third year in the palace, Pei Heng was assassinated at a palace banquet. He subconsciously protected me behind him and let the assassin's blade pierce his chest. The treatment process was painful. He was half asleep and half awake, groaning from time to time. I stayed by his side for 3 days without closing my eyes. When he woke up and looked at me, the first thing he said was, "Susu, I'm so happy. I finally protected you this time." I burst into tears instantly. I wanted to curse him, to quarrel with him, to tell him that he was the emperor and the prince was still so young, and he couldn't risk his life for a woman. But I couldn't say anything. He is the emperor, the king, and my husband. I can't stop him from being nice to me, just like I can't stop myself from falling in love with him. I hugged his shoulders and said sullenly, "Fool. How could there be an emperor with such a top-notch love brain?" 50. A body that has died twice is not very healthy after all. I died in the 5th year of my family reunion. Like the queen, I lay on the bed with a pale face, watching Pei Heng get angry and want to chop down the entire imperial hospital to bury with me. I coughed and waved him over. Touching the white hair on his temples, I whispered, "Pei Heng, I'm actually very lucky that I can die so early. I haven't become ugly yet, I haven't got any wrinkles yet, and you still like me. I have not forgotten who I originally was, nor have I been assimilated by this dynasty. I still know that everyone is equal, and I can empathize with those palace maids and eunuchs. I am not afraid of death. If the price of enjoying a peaceful old age is to completely integrate into this place, I would rather die with my values." I touched his face infatuatedly. "Pei Heng, I like you very much. Don't scare those imperial doctors. They just earn a salary to support their families. Pei Heng, you must remember that I really, really like you." When the typhoid fever didn't get better, and I was even coughing up blood, what I was thinking was, what would happen to Pei Heng if I died? He loves me so much, and his health is not good. What will he do if I die? I feel like I am hopeless. 51. I died in Pei Heng's arms. Peach blossoms fluttered down and landed quietly on the tip of my nose. I told him, "Actually, I'm very lucky. I have nothing to regret in my life." I grasped his wrist frivolously and said seriously, "You must live well and raise your child to adulthood. When I die, burn my body to ashes and scatter them into the sea. Don't bury it underground or it will be dug out by grave robbers. It would be ugly." I heard a whimpering sound in my ears, and I seemed to hear the flower buds blooming and the wind in my ears. Actually, there is one thing I haven't told Pei Hung. I love him, but if I were given a chance, I would still like to go home. I am very happy that when I die, I am not senile and can still remember who I am, where I come from, and why I have so many entanglements. I still don't like this era. I want to go home. I want my ashes to flow along the sea, across thousands of years, and return to the home I long for on my behalf.